down the toilet. The real election scandal in this country has nothing to do with acorn and the practices of voter registration, and has everything to do with the influence of massive war contractors on the democratic process in this country. They have individual members of Congress that they basically own. You have people like Duncan Hunter, whose son now has his seat in the Congress. Duncan Hunter was fond of saying, "God bless the contractors." When I was doing my initial reporting on Blackwater, I can't tell you how many Democratic representatives said, "I don't want to be portrayed as anti-contractor." That's big campaign cash. The Democrats got more money from the war industry in the last election cycle than the Republicans. Hillary Clinton, when she was on the campaign trail, was the #1 recipient of defense industry dollars. The defense industry isn't political. The bottom line for them is who's going to make us the most money. And they saw the writing on the wall. They saw who was going to win. And so they put their money toward the people that they thought they would want to be able to have influence over. So when we have a system now that is being cemented under a president that is perceived by many people to be a progressive president, who was perceived by people to have run an anti-war campaign, the fact that he now is taking these policies from the Bush administration and then promoting them, furthering them, continuing them, means that it's going to be cemented in a way that a John McCain presidency would have never been able to accomplish, because there would have been a continuation of the sort of rage against the Republican machine versus the Obama administration essentially making these policies official policy. It's not just abroad, though, that we're seeing this. I love to talk these days about the comparison between acorn and Blackwater, because I think it's an apt one, and it's the best and clearest way to call BS on those people in the Congress that voted to defund acorn. But it also cuts to the heart of what are our national priorities. I said last night that I think that the greatest national security threat that we face in this country is the lack of health care and adequate health care for people. There are more people that die every year from health care than Osama bin Laden could ever kill in his wildest imagination over the course of a 15-year sustained attack on the United States. And yet we continue to pour money, billions of dollars, into the wars in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which I would argue are making us less safe because they're increasing animosity and showing the sort of rogue nature of US foreign policy. But then you have an organization like Acorn, and it certainly has its problems, and I have political problems with Acorn that have to do with co-signing gentrification in my neighborhood and cutting deals with big developers. And there are a lot of disillusioned people. I know David Swanson worked with Acorn. There are people that could tell all sorts of tales about what the actual problems are with Acorn. But instead what we've seen is a witch hunt against an organization that registers millions of people that do not largely vote for Republicans. And they commit the heinous crime of registering black folks and Latinos and others to vote in elections. And apparently there are many that believe that, this in and of itself is a crime. So when the Defund Acorn Act was introduced by Representative John Boehner, only 75 Democrats in the House voted against it. And there were people like Claire McCaskill, who's been very good on the war contracting issue, that was denouncing Acorn left and right and talking about the outrage. Let's remember what those videos were for Acorn. You had people posing as a pimp and a prostitute, and going in and not talking to actual tax advisors from Acorn, but actually talking to staffers who had been in the periphery of tax advice, and after sort of sustained harassment, these people being kicked out of 15 plus places, they made the mistake of sitting there and having that conversation. Acorn fired them. They should have been fired. It was inappropriate and wrong what they did. But you want to talk about prostitution and government money. Let's talk about the fact that DynCorp, one of the large contractors currently on U.S. government payroll, was running a sex slavery ring in Bosnia during the 1990s. Let's talk about the testimony, sworn testimony of former Blackwater employees that allege that Blackwater had young girls serving as prostitutes in their man camp in Baghdad, giving Blackwater personnel blowjobs for $1 American. There's real prostitution to discuss, and much of it involves massive U.S. corporations. This discussion about Acorn and prostitution is flat out BS, and it's not just a double standard, it's an outrage. Acorn got $53 million over 15 years, $3.5 million a year. Much of it went to low-income housing, not directly to Acorn and not directly to any Acorn staff. The top 100 corporations that service the US government, primarily the war industry, made a cumulative amount of money in 2007 that was equal to almost $300 billion. They paid about $23 billion in fines for acts of fraud and waste and other abuse. So that's sort of the cost of doing business, and it's the taxpayers' money anyway. Blackwater, 90% of their business is with the federal government. 90% of Blackwater's business is with the federal government. And yet Blackwater continues to get multi-$100 million contracts now, currently, under this administration. So for those Democrats that voted to defund Acorn, you have to ask them, where's your defund Blackwater Act? Where's your defund Lockheed Martin Act? Where's your defund KBR Act? These are companies that have actual criminal records. These are companies that are under current criminal indictment for manslaughter and other charges. So we have a situation where an organization that was helping poor people in New Orleans in the aftermath of the flooding of the city being put up against a company who provided mercenaries to FEMA. And I don't know if FEMA's even arrived yet in New Orleans, but the Blackwater guys were there working on the US government payroll. That is sort of that's where the national priorities lie right now. And so what I see, wrapping up from what I said at the beginning, right now, is that we are living in one of the most dangerous moments in the history of this country because the president is so popular, because the president is liked, because the president is perceived as cleaning up the mess. People say, well, you got to give the guy time and you have to back off. When has that ever worked as a strategy for change anywhere in the world? You know, people talk about how Obama said, hold me accountable. It's not just about holding him accountable. Because to hold him accountable would hold him to policies that are bad policies. His policy in Afghanistan is a bad policy. I don't want to hold him accountable to his Afghanistan policy. I want him to get out of Afghanistan. I don't want to hold him accountable to his policy of regulating mercenaries. I want him to stop outsourcing U.S. war to unaccountable mercenaries that shoot people in cold blood in the streets of Baghdad and other cities across the nation. The hold me accountable line implies that we actually co-sign large parts of that agenda. No, what we need is confrontation on those policies that are not only violations of international law, but are also immoral. They're wrong, they're unjust. I'm all about defending President Obama when he acts in the spirit of justice. And I will write articles about it when he does it and praise him when he does the right thing. But when it comes to the issues that I focus on and other anti-war activists focus on, Barack Obama is doing little more than continuing, and in some cases making worse, foreign policies that were implemented under the Bush administration. These are deadly serious issues. We don't have the time or the luxury of saying, let's just give the man a little bit of space. That's not how change happens. That's not the way that we actually are going to move forward in this nation. So with that, I want to wrap up and thank you for your attention, and certainly happy for any discussion, debate, or questions. So thank you. No. Oh, okay. Well, they're saying that they're saying they want to break for lunch, but I don't know if people want to. See, I am going to have to leave right away, so if people did want to ask something, they should do it now because I'm going to have to leave.
We can do it in 5 minutes. That's great.
But, okay, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Jeremy. As usual, I get so much information from you. I want to bring another issue in. Where do you see the Obama administration going with Africa?
Oh, that's a whole. I actually have that in my notes. I didn't even mention it. Well, I think that what we're seeing in Africa is very similar to what we saw happening in the colonial era.